Inside every dad, calling him to lead. Society, vices, inner demons, negative thoughts try to dampen and drown out that voice, but it never goes away. Your wife feels it, your children feel it, and your heart and soul feel it too. It's the voice that starts off as a whisper, but then becomes a calling to be the tip of the spear for your family. A calling to play all out and lead by example for your children. A calling to build a legacy that will go on for generations. A calling to be the warrior dad you were born to be. Dads, our children need us now more than ever. To be that beacon of hope, courage, positivity, and strength. It's time to rise as warrior dads together as a brotherhood. If you felt that twinge in your soul, it's time for the Warrior Dad Experience. Welcome to the show. I am extremely excited to have special guest Nick Adams on the show. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, excited to dive into your book. First and foremost, let's start, right? This is a podcast all about dads and our dad journey. What's your dad dynamic look like in your household? How many kiddos you got?
We have 4 children. I've got 2 girls who are actually they've flown the nest. So I've got 2 college graduates who are doing life, and then I've got 2 boys who are 13 and 12. And so I've kind of had a gap in between those those 2 sets of kids, but 1 wife and 2 sets of children. So yeah.
There you go. Awesome. So you've got a book. What was the trigger to write that book? What's the name of it? And let's start diving into the book.
Sure. The book is called Being the Dad You Wish You Had, 5 Effective Stones of Fatherhood. And kind of the trigger was we were sitting around the dining room table one night and we'd started doing conversation starters around the dining room table. And so we were asking things and answering. And so my son asked this question from the conversation starter: if you could change one thing in the world, what would it be? And when he said that, immediately I knew the one thing that I would change if I could is I would create a world with effective fathers. And that became the genesis of the book. It's like, okay, that's really what I want to do. I want to change, I want to empower men to be more effective fathers. And so I started from that point working on developing the book.
And what triggered the name, and then describe or explain the concept of 5 big stones?
Sure. I think no matter what your fatherhood experience is, you probably have areas that you think, I wish my dad had been a little more of this, because none of us are perfect fathers, none of us are perfect parents. And so there's always something that you think, I wish they had done. I wish they'd have been a little more, a lot of people have had terrible father experiences, and some folks have had marginal, and some folks have had great father experiences, but all of us, I think, have areas we think, I wish my dad had done this. And so that's kind of the genesis, the title, the name is that being the dad you wish you had. And really it kind of flows over then to being the dad you wish you were, probably. But the five big stones of effective fatherhood comes from a story that I heard from Stephen Covey. I don't really know where it originated, but I kind of give Covey credit for it in the book. It's where I heard it. But he tells the story in relation to time management. And he tells the story about a professor who comes in and sits a bucket on his desk. And he takes another bucket out from under the desk, and it's full of big stones. He takes these big stones and he puts it in the bucket, and he asks his class, is the bucket full? And they're like, yeah, the bucket's full. And he pulls out another bucket of small stones, and he puts the small stones in, and they fall down around the big stones, and he puts a whole lot more in. And he's like, is the bucket full? And they kind of figure out that he's on to, he's into something. He's like, well, maybe not. And so he pulls out another bucket that's full of sand. He pours it in. He asks him if the bucket's full, and they're like, no. And they pull out another bucket, and he pours water in. And he's like, is the bucket full? And they're like, well, probably. And then he applies that to time management, that if you get the big things in first, then you can put a whole lot of other things in. But if you put the small things in first, then you don't have space for the big things. And so it's really that same idea that if in fatherhood, if we get the big pieces in there, then we can put a whole lot of other things in. But if we don't get the big pieces in to start with, then they just won't fit in the bucket. And so, you know, the book really isn't about me telling you how to be a better dad or giving you, like 100 points to if you do these 100 things, your kids are going to turn like who can remember 100 things? Who can remember 20 things? Like, and so really it's just like, here's five big principles that if
Mhm.
you can understand these and just integrate them into your life in whatever way is reasonable for you or is according to your temperament and makeup, then you're going to be able to be effective.
Gotcha. And I love that just picture. I mean, I was picturing the big bucket, big stones coming in, and you could fill something, and it made total sense for me. I hope it did for the dads listening. So, what are those five big stones? And then we'll unpack some of those as well.
Yeah. So the first big stone is the power of being. And I'll just run through them and then whichever ones you want to talk about or ask about, we can dive in a little bit more. But the first big stone is the power of being. And
Okay.
it's just that, we have a whole lot of influences as dads. And then the second big stone is to model the way, in that we have to and one of the things we talk about in that section is there's about 4 different chapters in there, but one of them is on values and trying to help us understand what do we want to have as our values, what do we want to pass down to our children as values. The third big stone is to be lovable, which I get a lot of kind of interesting feedback about that when people are like, what do you mean by that? But I think it's so important to realize that our goal as fathers is to create relationship and for that relationship to be lifelong
Mhm.
lasting, and to do that you got to be lovable. And so that's kind of big stone number 3. Big stone number 4 is to create the foundation for self-worth in your
Okay.
children. And then big stone number 5 is to create an atmosphere of unconditional love and support. And so, in each of those we look at, most of them have anywhere from 3 to 4 or 5 chapters in each section, and we
Mhm.
talk about the things that are gonna help you be able to fulfill each of those 5 big stones, and then at the end of each chapter, there's like a little reflection time, because, again, my goal isn't to tell you how to be a dad. My goal is to help you decide who you want to be as a dad, and part of that's giving you tools just to unpack, the things in the chapter and to reflect on it and decide how does this what does this look like if I live it out? So that's kind of the layout of the book.
I love that question. Who do you want to be as a dad?
Yeah,
Here, I'll throw a question your way. Do you think a lot of dads ask themselves that question?
that is, I think they do. I think a
Mhm.
lot of dads really, I'm not sure they ever come to an answer,
Mhm.
but I think they ask the question. I think there's that. I loved your intro. I think there's that gnawing thing of I want
Yep.
to step up. I want to do better. I want to be better. I talk to a lot of men who are really struggling as fathers and struggling in life, and yet you hear a common theme, and that is I really want to be a better father. I want to be a more impactful father, and a lot of times I hear I want to be a more effective father than what I had.
Mhm.
Which plays back into the title of the book.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I just think it's an interesting question where a lot of dads might have an idea, but I don't necessarily know if they ask themselves that question and like go through an exercise of like
Yeah.
writing down who do I want to be as a dad. I would say that's probably pretty rare that dads
Yes.
are
I
are
don't think
doing
very
that.
many people no, I don't think very many people do that at all. I think there's just that question inside, that
Mhm.
gnawing kind of question of how do I do better? But I don't think there's a whole lot of actual reflection. And that's part of what I'm trying to help people do, is to slow down, reflect a little, ask themselves some questions, and come up with some answers.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the first one I want to dive into. Model the way and values and kind of virtues, right? If dads typically want to be the best dad, but they're not defining who they want to be. Here's another area where if you're not embodying how you want your sons or daughters to grow up, I mean, they're gonna learn more from watching you than what you tell them. So unpack that big stone of modeling the way and values and virtues.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. If we don't figure out who we want to be, and if we're not intentionally living in a particular way, then they are going to pick things up. My father, I had a very rough connection with my dad. He wouldn't have been your ideal father, uh, and yet one of the things I talk about in the book is how much I learned from him,
Okay.
both good things and bad things. And how many pieces of who he was and what his values were still resonate with me. And he wasn't intentional at all. And so what I'm trying to do with the book and with fathers at this point is to say, hey, what do you really want this to look like? You've got to be proactively thinking. And so, I talk about in the book that there's a whole lot of values. And when you say values, they're all valuable. Like I've got a list in there of probably 40, 50, 60 values.
Okay.
Well, there's no way you can live all of those intentionally, purposefully. And so what I encourage people to do is that, in the reflection section is to go through that list and narrow it down. I kind of give you a way to narrow it down and to come
Mhm.
up with 4 to 7 that are your top values. And I encourage dads to talk to their partners and say, hey, here's what I think, here's the values that I have that are really important to me. What's really important to you? Let's, as a family, pick, 4 to 7 of them that we're going to really intentionally live out. And then what does that look like? And so, um, you know, because if you don't know what you're aiming for, you're not ever going to know if you hit the mark. And especially with things like values and virtues, and it's kind of nebulous. You know what you mean when you say it, but you're not really sure what the goal is, and so to be able to hone in on specific targets of this is what is important to me. Like one of my values is kind of tenacity, to just
Mhm.
you just don't quit. And I do endurance sports and all kinds of crazy things, but I want that to be a part of my life, not just a part of my hobbies. I want my
Right.
life to say, and it no matter how tough it gets, you just get up and keep going. And so that's one of the values that we're trying to pass down to our kids. And I tell the kids stories about their grandparents and how tenacious they were and how they just wouldn't stop, and that's this is who you are, this is what you come from, and so this is what we want to continue to do, and we don't stop, we don't anyway. So you've got to be intentional about what are those values and then be working on passing them down.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you added another component that I picked out there is not only the values of the virtues, and I'll just one of my top ones is energy and zest. I play with a lot of energy, a lot of zest, and I bring it every single day. But you
That's
gotta
awesome.
have targets underneath that value virtue that are actually measurable and you can hit. Like I exercise every single day, right? That what does that add
Yeah,
to? That adds to my energy and zest. I eat right, adds to my energy and zest. Like we've got to, the values and virtues, then you got to have targets you can actually hit because the values and virtues are an ideal, right? That we're kind of
right.
chasing after versus hey, having something that this is concrete, this is what I'm going to execute on and move forward. But I think it's so important to again ask yourself as a dad these questions of, hey, how do I want to lead and guide my kids to embody those? And they could be different from how you were raised or the challenges you went through, and you want to make that adjustment and make it a priority in the next generation of the family tree, right? So
Absolutely.
important. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that piece. What about so you mentioned you get a lot of comments about be lovable. What does that mean, and how did that chapter kind of come about? And unpack that one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think culturally, at least maybe it's changing a little bit. I'm getting old, so who knows. But culturally, historically, dad's kind of been the disciplinarian, the backstop, if you will. He's the guy that if everything's not going right, you, You're gonna talk to your dad when he gets home. It's that sentence,
Right.
and so tends to be that dad's the guy who either because he wants to or because he's asked to, he plays more of an authoritarian role, more of a disciplinarian role, more of the buck stops here kind of guy. And sometimes I think we take that into ourselves and we see ourselves that way. And so we come across a little more authoritarian. We come across a little bit harder than mom, and I don't think we should be like mom. And I don't think mom should be like us. We both have
Right.
our roles to play in the family. However, if all you're ever doing is kind of being the disciplinarian, the hard guy, the person who says no, the person who's always, the backstop for whatever's going on, then it's easy for kids to disconnect a little bit. And so we have to really work. And, you know, let's face it, stereotypically, I understand I'm getting ready to make a stereotypical statement, but, guys typically aren't as touchy-feely. They're not as in tune with their emotions. They're not as relational. There's all those things that we don't typically do as well as women. And so we have to work on it. It's again, part of that is cultural, and we're trying to change some of that, I think, in our culture. But
Yep.
at the same time, we just got to acknowledge as dad, it's really important to me that my kids feel emotionally connected to me. And so for them to feel emotionally connected to me, guess what? I'm going to have to be emotional. I mean? We're going to have to connect on an emotional level. And so when I'm talking about, being lovable, it all goes into that, is that, I'm just trying to be a person who somebody would want to be with. Do my kids want to be with me? Do they enjoy my company? Do we have fun together? Am I playful? Am I so tired at the end of the day, I just come home and collapse in the couch, or am I somebody who really engages with my kids and we have fun and we have jokes and we have inside jokes, and you just create that atmosphere of 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 relationship and of being lovable. And so I'm always looking for those opportunities as dad to connect with my kids. And one of the ways that I think I've been able to do it through the years is by having routines or rituals that we just do consistently.
Yeah.
And it creates memories and it creates relationship. And for years, when my girls were in elementary school, one day a week, I would take them to a local donut shop. And so first thing in the morning before we went to school, I'd take them to the donut shop and we'd get donuts and we'd, drink milk and just hang out. And they had a big glass window and you could look through and watch the donuts being made. It's just kind of magical. And so, we did that for years, every week, of their elementary school years. And, we got to know the employees and we got to know regular customers, and it's still, so today's Valentine's Day. And I took the girls, we were going to go out for breakfast this morning. And so I'm like, where do you want to go? And they're like, well, we could go to the donut shop, And so they're like 24 and 22. And that's still a viable option, is that because there's memories there, and that makes you lovable because you've got shared memories and shared experiences.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more about, hey, yes, we can be stern, we can be the disciplinarian from the dad side of things, but cracking that hard shell and letting your kids in. And I've got two boys, 15 and 13, and I don't know how it started, but they come and find my wife or myself if we're in the house before they leave, even just to go out and play with their buddies, and give us a hug, tell us we love them. I give them a kiss on the back of the head, and give them a bear hug a little bit. And
Yep.
that's just something that as dads, we need to do more of that, because it
Absolutely.
will connect you at a deeper way with your children. And I've seen it, in my boys as they progress to be 15 and 13. A lot of people, you hear the common theme, oh, just wait till they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't have to be that way if you pour into them and you have a deep bond. And that's happened. I've seen it happen in my boys. And doing things that they enjoy, I would also add on to that, is so important, right? Like my one son,
Absolutely.
we went to the gym at 5:15 this morning. he was doing legs, I was doing legs. We worked out together. It was a great 45 minutes together to bond. But I love the other aspect of routines, rituals, and traditions. I mean, we always remember those type of things, right? So what can
Right.
you do to
Right.
create, like going out for donuts with your girls? It's the time that matters, right? It's the
Yep.
experiences that matter that's gonna stick with them. And here, I mean, what a great story at 22 and 24 that, hey, we can go to the donut shop today. They still remember it. I mean, that's what we want as dads in the future, right? When they're 20, 30, 40, they still want to spend time with us. They still come home from time to time, or, do things together. That's really powerful. I love that piece. Atmosphere, unconditional love. I think that's so important. We can't give enough of that
Right.
to our children. Unpack that one for me, because that was the other one that really stood out as just an important factor as a dad, to be there and encourage and tell our kids that we're proud of them. We can't tell them enough, right? Because they're going to
No.
be faced. So unpack that for me, will you, Nick?
Yeah. I mean, one of the chapter headings there is dads call you to be your best. And I think part of unconditional love is that you really do try to energize your kids to be the best they can be, and not to be what I want them to be. That isn't the point at all. Like, I try to be really clear with my kids. It doesn't matter what I want you to be. God's created you to be somebody. Go be that person, and be the best version of you. And I try really hard to not put my expectations for what that looks like on them. And yet at the same time, to call them to their best, to say, I see this in you, and I want to see more of it, and to encourage that, and to be, we went through a thing, I think in most of the Western world, where we realized how important self-esteem was. And so we started trying to give everybody awards, and thinking that was going to boost their self-esteem. And man, did that ever backfire. And it's just like,
Right.
wow, what? And so I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about fake stuff. I'm talking about really paying the price to look at your kids, to know who they are, to know what their strengths are, to encourage them in their strengths, to every time you see them, go, wow, that's strong, man. That's something you were really good at. So they're able to identify it for themselves, and then they're able to step out and do that. And then, of course, and you've already said it, with that is just that sense of, I'm always here, and I'm always going to love you. Right now, I'm taking the boys to school about half the mornings, and every morning I make sure that they hear me say, I love you. I will always love you. And then I usually ask the question, what could you ever do that I won't love you? And, they're to the point that's like, nothing, and I'm like, that's right. There's nothing you'll ever do that I won't love you. And my younger son, we have adopted him.
Okay.
And he has some special needs. And he's moved from elementary school to middle school this year. And it has been an absolute train wreck. I mean, just an absolute train wreck. And I released this book, Being the Dad You Wish You Had, this past fall. And this past fall, I was called to the principal's office because of my son, more than I've ever been in the principal's office in my entire life. I mean, it's just constant. And so it's like, oh, that's great. Like, just help me realize that I have no idea what I'm doing here. But, every time I pick him up at the principal's office, and I've picked him up numerous times at this point in the school year. And every time I pick him up, we go through what did he do wrong, and, why that isn't okay. And, just all the stuff you got to do of teaching and coaching and trying to help him get a handle on what's going on in his life. And then when we get in the car, I always one of the first things I say after we get in the car is, hey, buddy, do I love you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, am I happy about the choices you made today? No, absolutely. But I will always love you. If I might disagree with your choices, there may be days I don't like you. That's okay. But I'll always love you, and I'll always be for you. And no matter what choices you make, good or bad, whether you are in trouble at school or not in trouble at school, dad will always love you. And just to reinforce that it's not about you doing it all right. It's not about you making me proud and I'm going to love you. I mean, if you
Mhm.
are an absolute disaster and embarrass me to death, I still love you to pieces and I will always love you. And so that's the message that, man, my kids hear constantly, just that support. And then I think they get to see me live it out because, I go and pick them up at the principal's office, and that's the thing I want to make sure they get is, yeah, I'm really disappointed. I might even be really angry because some of this behavior is outlandish, but I love you. That
Right.
doesn't change how I feel about you.
No, I love that. And we can't say it enough to our kids, and we can't
Right.
confirm it enough to our kids. And I go back to just when my kids were younger and I was the disciplinarian, sometimes getting on them and really disciplining them, and they had to go to their room, and I would go up and feel a little bit of remorse because I really got on them. I'd explain why, but then I'd always say, "Okay, it doesn't mean I don't love you. I love you more than anything in this world. I just always want you." And it would end in a hug and a bonding moment. So, I don't believe our kids could hear, "I love you. I'm so grateful for you," enough. You
No,
just can't say it enough. So
no.
dads listening to the
And
podcast, just know you can't say it enough.
no, absolutely. You could never oversay it. I mean, they get to the point they kind of act like, oh yeah, whatever. But no, you can't ever oversay that. You can ever overstate it. And then to realize, the world they live in, the pressure they're under, all the stuff that's going on inside as they grow up and try to figure out
Mhm.
who they are. I mean, they need to know there's a safe place. And they need to know that you're proud of them and what things in their life specifically you're proud of. Like I said earlier, just to be really specific about here's the things I see in your life. Here are the things that you do so well at, and make sure that they have those points that they can go back to and go, somebody who's really important in my life told me that I'm good at this, and I'm just going to believe it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for them to see it, right? So the more we can
Absolutely.
reinforce, I always like to say it's tough to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Yeah.
Dads, you can read the label and you can say, "Hey, here's what I've seen," reinforce it. And it's a great aspect from that being a dad and delivering that powerful message. So Nick, love the discussion. Where can people find the book? Where can they find you?
They can find the book on Amazon. Just search "Being the Dad You Wish You Had," and you can get it as a digital copy or paperback. Probably a couple of months, it'll be available as an audiobook as well. And then they can find me at being-dad.com, or email is just info@being-dad.com.
Awesome. Nick, thanks so much for being on the show.
Jeff, it's great to be with you.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Dare to be uncommon. Love, lead, legacy. Create a legendary day. And I'll talk to you soon.